when it's on the page, and you have guys like Kurt Russell and Bill Paxton and Val Kilmer. The cast in that film alone, all of them, and a lot of them are gone today.
Dust hangs in the air over Tombstone, Arizona. A lawman named Virgil Earp stands his ground, refusing to back down, even as danger closes in from every side. On screen, he looks unbreakable. That voice alone could stop a room. The mustache, the walk, the stare. This is the man America still calls the last real cowboy. But that's just the character. Behind the camera, the real man was fighting a battle no script ever prepared him for. For years, Sam Elliott let the world believe his life was as steady as his voice. Every interview stayed safe. Westerns, legends, decades of playing tough men who never flinched. Nobody asked what was happening at home. Nobody knew that inside his own family. Something was quietly breaking apart, far from any camera. Then, decades into his career, two very different storms hit him. Almost back to back. One had been buried for years before it finally surfaced. The other exploded in a single afternoon, turning Hollywood against him overnight. Two secrets. One man who had built an entire career on never showing weakness, but what happened next changed the way people saw him. Forever. Because this isn't just the story fans think they know, not just the gunslinger, not just the voice. This is what it really costs to keep playing the strong one, decade after decade, while your own life is quietly falling apart behind the scenes. Sam Elliott wasn't born into Hollywood. Raised in Oregon, shaped by a Texan family history, he grew up in love with the American West, long before anyone put him in front of a camera. He worked construction jobs. He served in the Air National Guard. He was just another young man trying to find his footing in Los Angeles. His first real film credit came in 1969, in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. But there was no spotlight waiting for him. He was billed as card player number 2, buried in the background. He didn't even meet his future wife, Catherine Ross, on that set. Even though she already had one of the lead roles, she was a name. He was nobody. It's almost impossible to imagine now. But for years, Sam Elliott was the man nobody noticed. He kept working anyway. Small parts, westerns, guest spots on Gunsmoke on Hawaii Five-0, a leading role in a horror film called Frogs in 1972. Not exactly the stuff of legend. It wasn't until 1976, with the drama Lifeguard, that people finally started to notice the voice, the presence, that quiet intensity simmering just beneath the surface. Then in 1978, on the set of The Legacy, everything changed again. He reconnected with Catherine Ross, and this time it was different. This time it was real. They married in 1984. Just 4 months later, they welcomed their daughter, Cleo Rose Elliott. By the mid-'80s, his career was finally taking shape. Opposite Cher in Mask, he showed the world he wasn't just a tough guy. He could be tender, steady, real. Golden Globe nominations followed. And then came 1993, the year that would define him forever. He played General John Buford in Gettysburg. And that same year, he stepped into the boots of Virgil Earp in Tombstone, standing shoulder to shoulder with Kurt Russell and Val Kilmer. It became one of his finest performances. The loyal, principled lawman, willing to risk everything for what was right. To the public, Sam Elliott had become the American West itself. Steady, honorable, unshakable. But behind that image, inside his own home, something was already forming. And no one outside that family would know the truth. For years. While his career soared through the 90s, his family carried a weight the cameras never saw. His daughter Cleo was growing up largely out of the spotlight, her parents fiercely protecting her privacy. From the outside, it looked like a fairy tale, a devoted husband, a talented wife, a beloved only child. But Catherine Ross would later reveal something no one expected. Cracks had existed since Cleo was very young. Emotional struggles, violent episodes, beginning as early as 12 or 13 years old. This wasn't headline material. This stayed locked inside the family, hidden the way so many painful things get hidden by people who've built their entire careers on appearing strong. Meanwhile, Elliott kept working. The Big Lebowski, We Were Soldiers, Ghost Rider, The Golden Compass. He became one of Hollywood's most trusted character actors. Respected by directors, adored by fans who couldn't get enough of that voice. Journalists asked him about horses, about mustaches, about the good old days of the Western. Almost no one asked what it was like raising a daughter while quietly carrying years of unspoken tension. And Elliott, ever the private man, never once brought it up himself. He stayed guarded, always polite, always in control. Fans loved him for it. He felt like the one actor who hadn't changed, who still carried the same quiet integrity as the characters he played on screen. But that same instinct to protect the people he loved also meant one thing. When the truth eventually became impossible to hide, the shock would hit twice as hard. Something was building, and it would not stay quiet forever. In 2011, it finally broke into the open. Catherine Ross filed a restraining order against their own daughter, Cleo, then 26 years old. Court documents revealed a nightmare no one saw coming. Cleo had attacked her mother with a pair of scissors, stabbing her again and again, hard enough to pierce through fabric and leave marks that stayed visible long after. For a family that had spent decades guarding their privacy, this was the worst-case scenario now sitting in the public record for anyone to read. Ross would later say her daughter had verbally and emotionally abused her since childhood, but that the violence had escalated far beyond anything she expected, and Sam Elliott said almost nothing. No dramatic interviews, no tabloid tour. He and his wife handled it the way they'd always handled everything, quietly, together, behind closed doors. But think about the timing. While audiences were watching him play unshakable lawmen and fearless gunslingers on their screens, his real family back home was fighting just to hold itself together. What happened next is almost harder to believe. Despite the restraining order, despite the pain, the family did not fall apart. Within a few years, Ross and Cleo were photographed together again, seemingly at peace. Whatever happened behind those closed doors, somehow they found their way through it. But ask yourself this: how many families could carry something like that in complete silence? While the whole world only wanted to talk about cowboy hats and Western nostalgia, some saw that silence as strength. Others wondered what it cost him to carry it, because if fans thought that was the hardest chapter of Sam Elliott's life, they had no idea what was coming next. And this time, there would be no hiding it. Not for a single day. By 2018, Elliott's career reached a height nobody expected. At 74 years old, after nearly 50 years in the business, he earned his first ever Academy Award nomination for A Star Is Born. When asked how it felt, he didn't hold anything back. "About fucking time," he said. After a lifetime spent in the background, he was finally being celebrated by the entire industry. Then in early 2022, everything changed. In a single afternoon, he sat down for an interview on Mark Maron's podcast, WTF. The conversation turned to Jane Campion's acclaimed film, The Power of the Dog, and what came out of his mouth next would follow him for months. He called the film a piece of garbage. He criticized its portrayal of masculinity. He said it was full of what he called illusions of homosexuality. He compared the cowboys in the film to Chippendales dancers. He questioned what a director from New Zealand could possibly know about the American West. The backlash was instant and brutal. People called the comments homophobic. Jane Campion herself fired back publicly, saying Elliott had hit what she called the trifecta: misogyny, xenophobia, and homophobia all at once. The story exploded across every entertainment outlet within hours. A man who had spent decades as Hollywood's most respected Western icon was suddenly being accused of the exact kind of narrow-minded thinking his own fans never thought he had in him. For a man who had spent his entire career being careful, private, guarded, this was a different kind of exposure, not a quiet family matter kept behind closed doors. A very public reckoning playing out in real time, with the whole industry watching, and the timing made it worse. He wasn't some forgotten actor with nothing left to lose. He was riding the biggest wave of his career, freshly celebrated by the very same industry now turning on him. Directors who had praised him for decades suddenly found themselves fielding uncomfortable questions. Younger fans who only knew him from 1883 were discovering for the first time a very different side of the man they thought they understood. The fallout didn't fade quickly. For over a month, the story followed him everywhere. Interviews, panels, even award season events. He had to sit with the weight of his own words in a way few actors his age ever expect to, this late in their careers. Then, in April 2022, he did something that surprised almost everyone. At a panel promoting his new series, 1883, he apologized, directly, publicly, no excuses. "I wasn't very articulate about it," he admitted. "I said some things that hurt people, and I feel terrible about that." He apologized by name to Benedict Cumberbatch and to the entire cast of The Power of the Dog. He acknowledged openly the support the gay community had given him throughout his entire career. It was a rare moment. A Hollywood tough guy, standing in front of everyone, admitting he got it wrong. That apology didn't erase the controversy, but it revealed something else entirely. The real man behind decades of stoic cowboy roles. Not perfect, not immune to criticism, but willing to own his mistake in front of the whole world. The same quiet strength he'd used to weather his family's private pain years before anyone else knew. And the damage turned out to be far more limited than anyone predicted. 1883 became a massive hit. He won a Screen Actors Guild Award. He went on to star in Landman, working once again with Taylor Sheridan, proving that even after the worst headlines of his career, audiences never really turned away. But the real revelation was never about ratings or awards. It was about what fans finally understood. The man who played the toughest lawmen, the coldest gunslingers Hollywood ever put on screen, had spent decades quietly absorbing real pain from his own family, and eventually from his own words, almost entirely out of public view. Today, Sam Elliott and Catherine Ross are still married more than 4 decades later. Their daughter Cleo has built a life of her own as a musician, and in recent years, the family has been seen together again, seemingly at peace. Elliott, now in his 80s, is still working. Still that unmistakable voice. Still that steady presence audiences trust without question. But underneath the legend, underneath the mustache, the drawl, the legendary tough guy image, is something far more human than anyone realized. A private family struggle, carried in silence for years. A public reckoning that forced him to face his own words in front of the entire world, and through all of it. A man who proved that real strength was never about staying silent forever. Sometimes it's about standing up, admitting you were wrong, and staying standing anyway. So here's the question. Does an apology like that change the way you see him? Or should moments like this never be forgotten, no matter how much time passes? Tell me what you think in the comments. I read every single one, and if you want more real Hollywood stories like this one, stories they don't usually tell you, make sure you subscribe. There's a lot more truth behind the legends still to come.